morning, Rodney.
Good morning, Gary. How are you?
Doing all right. Let's jump in with some football discussion. It was reported that Charlie Strong, former Louisville, Texas, and South Florida head coach, visited with the Alabama coaching staff last week, and head coach Nick Saban. What do you make of that? What are you hearing on your end? Is there a possibility that he could join the staff as an analyst? Of course, obviously, he's still getting paid by South Florida after getting let go there, and may still be getting some money from Texas. Who knows? But could he be joining the staff possibly as an analyst, or maybe even in an on-the-field role? What are you hearing?
Well, it's certainly possible, but I have not heard. I've not been able to confirm anything. It's been extremely quiet. Everyone I've spoken to is kind of out of the loop. Nobody really knows exactly what transpired with Strong, but obviously he was here, and there's at least some kind of a discussion of him possibly coming to Tuscaloosa in some form or fashion, it seems like, but nobody really knows. And then again, Nick Saban always talks about how he brings guys in just to talk football. It did not appear that that's what Charlie Strong was here to do, not just strictly football, but as you mentioned, Gary, maybe a possible position of some sort. But to be very clear, I have no idea at this moment exactly what that might be.
If he does join the staff in some capacity, certainly he would bring a ton of experience. We mentioned those 3 head coaching stops, incredibly successful at Louisville, got the Texas job, didn't work out there, landed down in South Florida, in Tampa, and didn't work out. But as a defensive coordinator, he has a reputation as one of the best in the country.
Well, I remember when he was with Urban Meyer, of course, that's been 10, 11 years ago, did a great job at Florida. Had a lot of talent, obviously, but you're right, Gary. He's been in the Big 12, coached there at Texas, as you mentioned, against some of these offenses that you face more and more nowadays, wide open type offenses. And, Charlie Strong's obviously got a great reputation as a coach. You've got another guy, you would have another guy on your staff that knows what it is to run a program. And listen, I know he struggled at Texas, but who hasn't of late? And at the same time, he did a great job at Louisville, kind of improving their program, as we saw. And so, yeah, he's a high-quality coach. There's no question about that. And anytime you can have a guy like that on your staff with his experience, it's very beneficial.
Rodney, you mentioned it's been pretty quiet around the football building. I think that's a good thing, coming off another successful recruiting campaign. Spring football is right around the corner. The 8A game will be on April 18th. And a double-digit number of the freshman signees have already enrolled. More will be coming in this summer. And the coaches, of course, are in their planning phases. And players are working in an off-season conditioning with Coach Scott Cochran. So quiet's probably a good thing this time of the year, don't you think?
Well, I think so. There's obviously a lot of change going on in terms of, personnel over there in some ways. And you've got a lot of young players you mentioned that are in now that I think 13 of the signees are already here going through the off-season program. And everything I have picked up, basically general stuff, that things are going very, very well with that group. They're very impressed with them, both as the work ethic that they've put in, but also how they handle themselves has been very impressive. And but I've heard as a group that they're the coaching staff is very, very pleased with the way they have performed in the off season. So going to be really interesting watching these early enrollees this spring, because some of them, we've talked about Bryce Young, but also Drew Sanders, Chris Braswell, Demoy Kennedy, Will Anderson, and again, just naming a few, not going through them all, but those are some guys that are certainly going to push for some opportunity to contribute next year.
Rodney, when you look at Coach Saban's tenure, there are a lot of amazing accomplishments and things that people just, are in awe of what he's been able to do. But of all the things that he's done, I think probably the one that's the most surprising, honestly, based on what we heard and read when he came here, is just his tenure, Rod. I think even the most optimistic of persons, when Nick Saban took this job in 2007, said, heck, if he just stays here 8 or 10 years, it'll be a great run. He's about to go into his 14th season, which is by far the longest. Doubles up Gene Stallings' 7 years, the longest tenure of anyone since Coach Bright. To me, that's probably the most amazing, is that he's just still here and going into his 14th year. I don't think many people guessed that he would have coached here that long.
No. I think everyone, if you would have said, laid 14 years on the table and put up some money, you'd have probably won a lot of. You'd have probably be rich right now. And but again, I think right now and I was thinking about this yesterday. I think that the young competition. We've said this before, but I think the young competition over Georgia with Kirby Smart, Tennessee, Jeremy Pruitt, the Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M. Now you've got Lane Kiffin over at Ole Miss. You've got Leach at Mississippi State. Just all of this competition around him, I think, is elevating him to another level in terms of he's always been motivated, but it's kept him motivated, I think. I just think that having challengers, he's so high and thrives on competition that all of these different competitors around the SEC have certainly I don't know if reinvigorated is the right word, Gary, because it insinuates that maybe he lost something. I'm not sure that's it at all, but I do think that it's kept him highly motivated. And as you're talking about moving forward, I mean, I think that this kind of motivates him for, several more years, possibly.
Yeah, I'm with you. He's just ultra competitive, and the race is on for a former assistant to defeat Coach Saban. As we know, he's undefeated against his former assistants, but with half the league now, former Saban assistants, at some point, somebody will get him. But maybe it won't be this year. But as you said, the
thing is that you're right about that. Probably somebody will. And, one of the things here, I think with this program, one of the worst things is, and I think it's one of the things that Nick Saban has done a great job in terms of managing, is the overreaction. This program overreacts to success, and it overreacts to things that don't go its way, of just the fan base around it, the expectations. So I think Nick Saban's done a great job in terms of managing what you have to do. That's part of being the head coach at Alabama. I think that's what makes Alabama so different. People think you can just plug in a coach here at Alabama. It takes a special coach. Now, listen, we know all these coaches have had seasons where they've won 10 games, but that's not the expectation at Alabama. So I think it takes when we talked about this before, these are part of things that it's not just coaching, it's not just recruiting, it's managing this whole program. And Alabama is a lot different than 99.9% of the other programs around the country.
Absolutely. I want to ask you about the offense and continuity on the staff, certainly. And Sark is back and has done a great job. But you do lose Tua, you do lose Ruggs, and you lose Judy. Now you get Waddle back and you get Smith back, and Mac Jones now has some experience. You got Bryce Young coming in. You got two other quarterbacks on scholarship in Talia Tagovailoa and Paul Tyson. Offensively, Rodney, you're going to be loaded at running back. The offensive line should be strong. Do you anticipate that the offense will change some without Tua and with all these backs and losing a couple of receivers, or do you think it will pretty much be the same as it has been under Sark in 2019, or do you think maybe there'll be some wrinkles and maybe they'll be a little more run heavy in 2020? What's your feeling on the offense going forward?
No, I really think they'll try to stay as balanced as possible. Would they throw it against Auburn 39 times? I think it was. I think he threw it over 30 or against Michigan, close to it. I don't think it's changed a whole lot or changed a whole lot in terms of the numbers. But obviously, yeah. I mean, I think they've got a chance to be a better running team because for a couple of reasons. Number one is I think the offensive line has a chance to be better, even though it was really good down the stretch. I think they improved down the stretch quite a bit, and they became a good running team with Najee Harris going over 1,200 yards. And they've got all those running backs you mentioned. So I think, certainly they probably now have more strength in that area versus last year when and they had so many strengths at the wide receiver spot. But again, you've got Devontae Smith back. You've got Jalen Waddle back, two of the best wide receivers in the country. John Mechie's a young player. You've got other wide receivers, Slade Bolden. You've got some coming in. I still think that they're going to utilize, those guys, and they're going to throw the ball. So I really look for balance and maybe slightly run a little more, but not. I don't think it's going to be much different in that regard.
Defensively, whether Charlie Strong is on board in some capacity or not, you just have to believe that there's no way you're going to have that number of injuries on that side of the ball 2 years in a row. Now, you do lose two good edge pass rushers. You lose a cornerback. You lose an outstanding safety in McKinney. But personnel-wise, they get some guys back off of injury. They recruited heavily on the defensive line. And LeBron Ray should be back. So you should have more depth. And just based on the fact that you just can't fathom that they'll have that many injuries again. The defense, I would expect to be improved. Rodney, would you agree with that?
Well, I hope so. We'll see. I think that one of the keys is for everyone to be on the same page. And, it starts with the coaching staff on the defensive side of the ball. And so hopefully that all happens. And, they look, when you had injuries and you're playing two true freshmen, inside linebacker, and one guy who had never played linebacker in his career, Gary Christian Harris, he was a defensive back, played other positions as well in high school, but not linebacker, not inside linebacker. So all of that was a learning experience. I thought Christian Harris, for example, really progressed as the season went along. He's going to be a fantastic player, in my opinion. Now you've got Dylan Moses coming back. You just hope that Dylan, after that injury, Gary, can be the Dylan Moses that he was before. You remember, it took Dante Hightower a season to get back to where he was. And again, I don't know that those injuries are similar or whatever, but some of it is psychological as well. So you hope that Dylan Moses is back. You've got to develop some guys outside. Chris Allen, we've talked about him, King Makuta, Jerez Parks, Kevin Harris. They've got some young freshmen that we mentioned earlier that will have a chance to compete for playing time. And I think, too, we've talked about this on your show. I think that the tackling has to be much better. Fundamentally, they have to be better. Especially in the secondary, I thought at corners, they were, frankly, weak tacklers last year. They seemed passive at times, and I think that has to improve. And that's not saying that these guys, Surtain and Job or whoever it is that lines up out there, can't be good tacklers. I think they can. But it just has to become more consistent.
The case of Iabi Anoma continued this past week. The former Alabama pass rusher dismissed from school, wound up at Houston. The head coach there, Dana Holgerson, said he was the most disruptive defensive lineman he'd ever seen. And yet they dismissed him as well, and he's back in the transfer portal. Incredibly talented football player, but he's going to quickly run out of stops. I guess, somebody else I'm sure will give him a shot. You hope it works out for him, but that is just an odd situation with a guy with that kind of talent that just can't seem to get it together off the field.
Yeah, he's a great player. I mean, he's great tools, no question about that. And, Gary, that was another one. You talk about injuries and all the guys that Alabama lost. You talk LeBron Ray, Dylan Moses, et cetera. Even DJ Dale was a true freshman who they had high expectations for last year, and he was not quite up to par because of his, knees. He had some issues there. Hopefully he's fully recovered. And then you lose a guy like Iabi Anoma, who could have been a difference maker as a pass rusher. So I think all of those things certainly contribute to putting the Alabama defense in a hole last year. But as far as his future, I mean, who really knows? I mean, right now, it's more about him than it is about football. Hopefully he can kind of get himself in a position where he can develop his potential as a football player, but it's going to start off the field.
Yeah, you just have to hope that he gets it together. Finally, Rod, a basketball question, and then we'll turn you loose. Alabama with that huge win over LSU. Herbert Jones, an incredible performance. This team still got a chance, and they've proven they can beat anybody in this league. They've got to avoid the close losses, but maybe Saturday winning a close one at home against LSU will kind of spark a strong finish for this team. Alabama's had trouble in the past finishing out the regular season strong. Maybe this will be the year that they do it.
Well, they finished strong the other day. I mean, it got a little bit after having, an 18-point lead with about 6.5 minutes left, whatever it was. Got really close, obviously, and but they did not fold. And that's a great sign, especially given all the, situations that they've had. And then you mentioned Herbert Jones. I mean, what a tremendous effort he had. They're shooting those one-handed free throws. And also, Gary, 17 rebounds, I think it was. Amazing his effort. Yeah, and I think he was a little, obviously he's had the broken wrist, but I think he was having some pain there during the game. You could see him a few times, struggling with it, but he fought through it, man. It was an incredible effort and just a big win for Alabama. As you start to look down the stretch, I think they have 6 games left now. And listen, they're certainly in a position to where this is a team that could close, 6-0, 7-0 if you include the LSU game. So, I think Nate Oates is doing a great job right now, and looking forward to seeing how they kind of finish up the season.
Indeed. It's going to be fun for sure. All right, Rod, TiderInsider.com. Let the listeners in on how they can be a part of it.
TiderInsider.com. It's only $48 a year. You can get access with your credit card if you prefer. There's an address there to send a check, and it gives you all our premium information, but also the forums right now. And that's kind of the hot thing, Gary, because we mentioned just how quiet it's been. Not a lot out there. We're still in a deep period for 2021, and so it's kind of been quiet. But guess what? Next month, spring practice starts. We've had a few previews of that, an early preview, and just once that gets going, there's going to be a lot of interesting storylines, I think, this spring.
Indeed, always is the case. Thank you, Rodney.
Okay, buddy. Take care.